He didn't see the anomaly so much as feel it, like a fingertip pressing lightly against the back of his neck. 1 second, the stars were steady chalk dust on black velvet. The next, the field around his shuttle rippled, instruments stuttering from green to amber to red as if unsure which color matched survival. Not funny, Aryan muttered to a silent cockpit. The gravimeter spiked. Hull plates shivered. Something curved gravity into a loop and tugged him through. Then calm. No alarms, no screaming metal. The starfield shifted to a sky that wasn't a sky at all. A luminous haze of green-blue, like aurora trapped in glass. His shuttle coasted toward a floating archipelago of islands suspended above a radiant sea, each island capped with violet leaf forests and sheer cliffs that bled silver waterfalls into open air. He tried to swallow the astonishment, failed, and laughed once breathless. If this was death, it had ambition. He skimmed the largest island. The shuttle's belly lights through a pale cone across terraces carved into the rock, each ringed with moss that glowed when touched by the beam. Stone pillars stood at the terrace edges, veined with bioluminescent filigree that pulsed like a heartbeat. His comm picked up nothing but a low-frequency hum. Not machine, not natural weather. Purposeful, singing through the bones of the place. Control, this is Aryan Vale, Exploratory Unit 6, he tried, out of habit more than hope. Static answered, soft as rain. He checked the fuel reserves, the coil temperature, the emergency packs. Alive, supplied, marooned. He landed on a flat shelf of ivory rock. The ramp side open and warm, sweet air rolled in. Sap and metal and rain after drought. The ground was warm, too, as if heated from within. Tiny motes rose where his boots pressed, lifting like sparks and fading. When he lifted his eyes, he realized he wasn't alone. She stood 3 terraces above, outlined in the sea glow. Tall, poised, armor shaped like grown bark slipped over her limbs, iridescent with embedded mineral lines, an organic exosuit rather than something manufactured. Her hair, if that's what it was, fell in thick, luminescent strands that shifted hue with her breathing. Her eyes were a color he had no name for, green only the way lightning is white, more phenomenon than pigment. Aryan lifted his hands, palms open, and felt the ridiculous urge to introduce himself like a tourist who'd taken a wrong turn into a private ceremony. "I come in peace," would have been accurate and cliché at the same time. She spoke first, the language rippling like a stream over stones, vowel-rich and measured. The suit at Aryan's forearm pinged. Auto-translate brute-forcing at a basic level, catching structure, missing nouns. He nodded slowly, tapped the suit's external speaker, and said, "I don't understand," then touched his chest. "Aryan." A pause. Then he pointed lightly toward her, the question floating between them. She considered his gesture, then placed her own hand over her breastbone. "Saris," she said, and the translator caught the phonemes well enough to echo them back into his ear. He didn't move closer. He made himself patient. New ground requires patience, his old flight instructor used to say. Space eats the hurried. Others joined her. 3 figures, then 5, their armor less ornate than hers, faces masked with clear plates that breathed mist. They carried tools that could have been weapons or instruments, stiffening when he shifted his stance, reading threat where there was only a nervous shift of weight. Saris lifted her hand, and the others dropped their shoulders by degrees. Even without language, the hierarchy was obvious. She descended 1 terrace, then the next, every step balanced, like gravity, and she had a private agreement. At the base of the last terrace, she stopped 10 paces away. He kept his hands visible. A long breath drew in and out of the group. The air's hum adjusted pitch, almost like it listened. Saris extended an arm. Not a handshake, not a beckon, something in between. She turned her palm and angled her fingers toward the island's interior, up, toward the higher terraces. Her voice came again. The translator rendered a few words threadbare. Come. See. Needed. Needed. The word hit like a steadying hand between Aryun's shoulders. He nodded. He told himself to walk, not rush. He followed, careful on the terrace stairs, which were less steps than lines of grown stone, edges rounded by passage. Close to the pillars, he could see the filigree wasn't inlay. It was alive. A slow pulse, like sap moving. He reached out without thinking, then pulled his hand back, apology half-formed. Saris watched his restraint and gave a small, brief nod, as if he'd passed a test he hadn't known existed. As they climbed, the island's architecture shifted from rough-hewn to deliberate. At the fifth terrace, a corridor of pillars framed a path, each pillar marked with handprints. Some were small enough to belong to children. Others were lattice patterns, like many smaller hands pressed together to form a whole. When Aryun's light brushed them, faint symbols appeared within the prints, curves and spirals that no translation suite could solve at a glance. He felt the urge again, to press his palm beside those echoes of palms. He kept it to himself. At the seventh terrace, the path ended at a cliff. No, not a cliff, a wall. A door disguised as a cliff face, surface matte as old bone. It was not cut, not fused. It was grown, and it was sealed. Saris stood with her hands clasped. He watched her throat work around a breath. For the first time, the composure cracked. A thin line of grief crossed her mouth, vanished. When she spoke, the translator tried its best, snagging grammar and docking it to his language with gaps left surgical clean. Our place of beginning. Our memory. Close. Long time. Our hands cannot. The word say starborn opens. Starborn. It could mean a lot of things, too poetic to be precise. It could mean someone from space. It could mean someone whose ancestry matched something coded into the door's memory. It could mean a myth they were trying to set a stranger inside like a key. Aryun swallowed. I'm not a hero, he said, because it felt important to name aloud. The words went into the translator, came out in soft fragments that made Saris tilt her head in a way he hoped meant understanding rather than confusion. He stepped closer to the wall. It felt colder than the air. The hum he'd noticed after landing grew louder, a tone he could almost match in his throat if he tried. He didn't touch it. He looked for seams, for interfaces. He saw none. He saw, instead, that the handprints had continued up here too, faded into the wall's surface, as if those who'd come before had petitioned it with their palms until the stone remembered them. Behind him, the guards shifted. One of them said something clipped. Saris replied with a single syllable that carried enough authority to quiet the terrace. She came to stand at his shoulder. When she spoke this time, she took it slow, syllable by syllable, like stones placed carefully to build a bridge. You, the translator found. Your pattern. It answers. Maybe. Pattern. He thought of gene locks and harmonic keys, of devices that recognized not just flesh, but the frequencies of a body. The way heart and lung and bone sang together. It made as much sense as anything else out here, where islands hovered and moss glowed. The seam in the cliff face stayed narrow, a luminous scar that refused to widen. When Aryun woke the next morning, he half wondered if he'd dreamed it. But Saris was waiting outside the chamber they'd given him, and in her eyes he saw the same mix of fear and hunger for hope. It hadn't been a dream. The wall had stirred. They climbed back up together, past terraces where her people knelt in silent vigil. Children whispered when he passed, tugging at their elders' hands. The elders whispered too, but their whispers carried the brittle edge of caution. A savior from the stars sounded glorious in song. In practice, it was an unsettling gamble. At the cliff, the seams still glowed faintly. The guards were already there. One paced, agitated. Another stared openly at Aryun, mistrust carved into every line of his jaw. They wanted results, Proof he wasn't just a pretender who had tripped into a half-response from their sacred wall. Ceres broke the silence first. "It listened to you," she said, her translator smoothing the syllables into something steady. "That has never happened. Not for me, not for my mother before me, not for the high priests who spent lifetimes trying." She glanced at the seam, then back at him. "It means you are the one." Aryan almost laughed. He didn't feel like the one. He felt like a pilot who had survived his luck one mission too long. He wanted to tell her he was just human, fragile, finite, full of flaws. But the hope in her gaze stopped him. Some truths aren't denials. They're burdens, and this one had already settled across his shoulders. He pressed his bare hand against the seam again. The wall warmed, then pulsed once, but nothing more. He closed his eyes, tried to match his breathing to the strange undertones humming through the stone. Still nothing. He pulled away, heart sinking. The guard who'd stared at him let out a sharp laugh. "Trick of chance," the translator whispered in his ear. "He is no different than us." Ceres snapped her head around. "Enough," she said, and though her voice was quiet, it cut like tempered glass. The guard stiffened, but held his glare. Aryan recognized that look. It was the same soldiers gave a new commander before battle, a challenge offered with eyes if not words. He knew winning them over wouldn't come from one moment at the wall. It would come from staying, from showing he didn't break and run. He stepped back, flexing the sting from his hand. "If it opened once, even a crack," he said, "then it can open again. Maybe it takes more than one attempt. Maybe it takes us learning each other." Ceres tilted her head. "Learning each other? Your people, your history, your way of listening. And mine." He tried to find the words. Maybe the wall isn't just about blood or bones. Maybe it wants something else. A connection. Her expression softened. "You speak like one who has read the old verses. They say the door listens not to strength, but to what flows between souls." She paused, then almost shyly. "We call it the bond." The bond! The word hung in the air like a seed waiting for soil. That night, she told him the full legend. By firelight, surrounded by the luminous moss of the terraces, Ceres spoke of the time before the ceiling. Her ancestors had wielded power from the vault inside the wall. A power meant to heal, to balance, to keep their world alight. But greed had grown. They had tried to wield it as a weapon, and the vault had closed, punishing them. Since then, their lives had been lived in the shadow of that loss. And through it all, a prophecy endured. One not born of their world would come, someone who had traveled the seas of stars. Only that one's touch, joined with the bond of their kind, would open the way again. "You see," Ceres said, firelight dancing in her eyes. "It was never meant to be only one. It was always meant to be two. A bridge." Aryan sat quiet, the flames crackling between them. He wanted to tell her he wasn't the bridge she needed. But he remembered how the wall had hummed beneath his palm, how it had recognized something. Maybe he wasn't enough alone. Maybe with her, he was. Before he could answer, the alarm sounded. It wasn't bells or sirens. It was the moss, dimming all at once. The fire sputtered strangely, pulled sideways. The air thrummed with a warning vibration. Ceres rose instantly, face set. "They've come." "Who?" Aryan asked, standing with her. "The Keth," she spat. "Raiders. They've watched us for generations, waiting for the vault to stir. They'll want its power for themselves." Shadows broke against the horizon, ships sliding from the cover of storm clouds. Sleek, predatory, too many for the island's scattered defenders. Aryan's instincts surged to the surface. He was a pilot, a soldier. He knew the rhythm of incoming war. Fear coiled low in his gut, but with it came clarity. "Where's your defense grid?" he asked, already scanning the terraces for emplacements. Ceres grimaced. We have only blades and the sky beasts. The vault was our shield. Without it, we endure, but we cannot repel an armada. The first lances of fire streaked downward, impacting on the outer terraces. Stone shattered, moss burned. Aryan grabbed Ceres's wrist. Then you'll need tactics. You'll need a fight they don't expect. What do you know of fighting, Keth? She demanded, anger flashing, but she didn't pull away. Nothing, he admitted. But I know how to fight impossible odds. Humans specialize in it. Her gaze flickered over him, assessing, weighing. The fire painted the planes of her face in determination. Finally, she gave a single sharp nod. Then stand with me. The night bled into chaos. The Keth landed in heavy, insectal dropships, pouring out armored troops. The defenders met them with spears tipped in glowing crystal and the swooping shapes of winged beasts. Aryan fell into the rhythm, shouting orders, directing formations. What they lacked in numbers, they compensated with terrain. Narrow terraces, choke points, ambushes from the air. Through it all, the wall loomed above, seemed glowing faint but steady, as if it too watched. By dawn, they were bloodied but alive. The Keth had withdrawn temporarily, regrouping. The terraces smoldered, ash mixing with silver dust. Aryan stood at the cliff's edge, chest heaving, his hands raw from gripping weapons not meant for him. Ceres came to stand beside him. She was streaked with soot and blood, one shoulder scorched, but her eyes were alive. "You fought as one of us," she said softly. "I fought because it was the only choice," he answered. Then he looked at her. "But if that vault holds what you say, then it's the only way we survive the next wave." Her eyes turned to the seam, faint light glinting in the smoke. She took his hand in hers this time, no hesitation. "Then we open it together. No more delay." Her palm was warm, calloused. The bond, she had called it. Aryan felt it spark through the grip. Two patterns meeting, harmonizing. He turned toward the wall, heart thudding. For the first time, he didn't feel like he was standing alone against destiny. He felt like he was standing with her, and the smoke still clung to the terraces when they climbed again. Aryan's muscles ached from battle, his lungs raw with ash, but his hand remained twined with Ceres's. Behind them, her people limped, carried, or marched, wounded yet unbroken. Above them, the seam in the cliff glowed brighter than it had the night before, like a heartbeat waiting to be answered. The Keth weren't gone. Their ships hovered on the horizon, blotting out stars, their silhouettes predatory and patient. They would strike again, and this time they would not relent until every terrace burned. Ceres stopped at the base of the wall. She turned to Aryan, luminous hair dulled by soot but her gaze sharp. "This is the moment our ancestors dreamed of," she said, voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "If we fail, my people fall. If we succeed, everything changes." Aryan studied the wall, the living stone alive with veins of light. "I'm not afraid of change," he said quietly. "I'm afraid of wasting the chance." She squeezed his hand once, then lifted their joined palms toward the seam. Together they pressed against the cold surface. The stone was icy at first, then warming, then alive. The hum returned, deeper than before, vibrating in Aryan's bones. But it was different this time. Harmonized. Not his pulse alone, not hers alone. Something woven of both. The seam widened, slowly, reluctantly. Light bled out, soft at first, then searing. The air sang, not with words but with a resonance that brought tears unbidden to Aryan's eyes. The guards fell to their knees. Even the injured whispered in awe. And then the wall opened. Beyond lay a vast chamber, carved not by hands but by intention. Its walls glowed with constellations, each star pulsing in rhythm with the heartbeat of the planet itself. In the center stood a crystalline structure, like a tree grown from light, its roots burrowed deep into the rock, its branches reaching for eternity. The power Saris had spoken of. The vault. Aryun stepped inside with her. The air was electric, every breath tasting of metal and rain. The structure pulsed faster as they approached, responding. At its base lay two hollows side by side, shaped not for tools but for hands. Saris looked at him, tears streaking clean lines down her dust-stained face. "Together," she whispered. They placed their hands in the hollows. The world shifted. Aryun saw flashes not his own. Centuries of Saris's people, thriving, falling, pleading against the sealed door. He felt their hunger, their grief, their longing. At the same time, his own memories spilled out. Earth's skies, a childhood of struggle, the lonely silence of space duty. Two lives braided by the vault into a single thread. Light surged through their veins. Not pain, not exactly, but intensity so pure it bordered on unbearable. He gasped, but Saris's grip anchored him. He anchored her back. The crystalline tree blazed, sending shafts of light into the chamber's walls. The constellations lit fully, then expanded outward, through the rock, through the terraces, across the entire island. Outside, the Keth ships faltered. Their weapon systems sparked, shorted, and went dead. Pilots shouted, disoriented, as the radiant energy pressed against them like an unbreachable shield. The vault had awoken, and it did not recognize the Keth as its children. On the terraces, Saris's people cried out in joy. Wounds began to knit under the glow. Broken stone lifted itself into place. Moss regrew in lush cascades of green. The island breathed again, alive. When the blaze dimmed enough for Aryun to see, Saris was staring at him. Her eyes were wet, her chest heaving, but a smile curved her lips. "You are the bridge," she whispered. He shook his head, dazed. "No, we are." The vault pulsed one last time, softer now, as if satisfied. The door behind them sealed once more, not with finality but with guardianship. It would not close them out again, not as long as the bond endured. They stepped back into dawn. The Keth were gone, retreating shadows chased by light. The terraces glowed like emerald fire. Her people bowed as one, but Saris raised her hand to stop them. "He is not our god," she said firmly, her voice carrying over the terraces. "He is our ally, our equal, and with him, we will begin anew." Aryun swallowed, unused to reverence. But when Saris turned and slipped her fingers into his, the weight of expectation didn't crush him. It steadied him. Later, as the celebrations rose and the people sang old verses reborn as new, Aryun and Saris stood at the edge of the terraces, watching the sea shimmer below. "You opened more than the vault," she said softly. "And you opened more than a door," he answered. Silence settled between them, comfortable, vast. The kind of silence you could build a future in. Above, the stars blinked awake in the broadening sky. For the first time in years, Aryun didn't see them as destinations or escape routes. He saw them as witnesses, the alien princess and the human pilot. Together, they had broken a seal older than memory. Together, they had changed everything. And as dawn gilded the terraces in gold, he realized that sometimes humanity's greatest power wasn't invention, or defiance, or even survival. Sometimes, it was the simple courage to reach across the unknown and hold on.